The morning my husband told me he was leaving, I was wearing yellow dish gloves and standing over a sink full of soapy water. That's the detail I remember most. Not the words he said or the way he couldn't look me in the eye. Just those ridiculous rubber gloves, bright as sunshine, while my entire world went dark. I need something more. Jessica, he said like he was ordering coffee. You're a wonderful person, but we've grown apart. Wonderful, that word stuck in my throat like a bone. Wonderful is what you call someone safe, someone predictable, someone you're about to leave behind. I peeled off those gloves, one finger at a time, and placed them carefully on the counter. My hands were shaking but I refused to let him see. When? I asked. When did you decide this? He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. It's been building for a while. I need space to figure things out, space. As if 22 years of marriage could be solved by a little distance. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw those damn gloves at his face. Instead, I nodded like the wonderful person I was and watched him walk upstairs to pack. By sunset, his car was gone from the driveway, and I was alone in a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. That first night, I sat at the kitchen table until 3 in the morning, staring at my wedding ring. Under the harsh fluorescent light, it looked cheap and ordinary. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made. The promotion I'd turned down because his job required us to move. The graduate program I'd deferred until the timing was better. The dreams I'd folded up like old letters and tucked away in drawers I never opened. I'd spent 2 decades being supportive, being flexible, being wonderful. And now I was sitting alone in a silent house, wearing the same pajamas I'd owned for 5 years, wondering who the hell I'd become. My daughter Emily called the next morning. Mom, Dad told me. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I could hear the worry in her voice. The way she was already preparing to take care of me. At 24, she was still my little girl, but somewhere along the way, she'd started treating me like I was fragile. I'm fine, sweetheart, I lied. These things happen. Do you want me to come home? I can take a few days off work. No. You have that big presentation. I'll be fine. After we hung up, I looked around the kitchen. Dishes in the sink, coffee stains on the counter. A calendar on the wall filled with his appointments, not mine. I'd been so busy managing everyone else's life that I'd forgotten I had one of my own. That afternoon, my best friend Rachel showed up with wine and pizza. She took one look at me and pulled me into a hug so tight I finally let myself cry. He's an idiot, she said, pouring us both generous glasses. You know that, right? I laughed through my tears. A wonderful idiot, apparently. We spent the evening on the couch, eating cold pizza and talking about everything except the obvious. But when she left, the silence came rushing back like a tide. I stood at the window watching her taillights disappear down the street, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely unmoored. The next few weeks passed in a strange fog. I went to work at the library, smiled at patrons, reshuffled books, and came home to an empty house. Friends called with sympathy. My mother sent a card that said, "Time heals all wounds." As if heartbreak was just a scraped knee. Everyone meant well. But their kindness felt suffocating. They all saw me the same way, poor Jessica, abandoned after all those years. The woman who gave up everything and got nothing in return. One Tuesday evening, I found myself standing in front of the mirror in our bedroom. His bedroom, I corrected myself. Not ours anymore. I studied my reflection like I was meeting a stranger. 45 years old, hair going gray at the temples. Lines around my eyes that I'd stopped trying to hide. When had I started dressing like someone invisible? When had I stopped caring? That night I made a decision. I grabbed a trash bag from under the sink and started going through the house. Every picture of us together, every gift he'd given me, every reminder of a life that no longer existed, I threw it all away. By midnight, I had 4 bags sitting by the curb, and an empty house that finally felt like mine. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. I called in sick to work, something I hadn't done in years, and spent the day doing things I'd always put off. I signed up for a pottery class I'd seen advertised at the community center. I bought a sketchbook and a set of charcoal pencils. I went to a bookstore and spent an hour just browsing, no agenda, no hurry. When Emily called that evening, she sounded surprised. "Mom, you sound different. Are you sure you're okay?" "I'm more than okay," I said, and for the first time, I meant it. The pottery class met on Thursday evenings in a small studio downtown. I almost didn't go. Standing outside the building, I could see through the windows, people laughing, shaping clay with confident hands. I felt like an imposter. A middle-aged woman trying to pretend she was interesting. But I walked in anyway. The instructor, a woman named Margaret with silver hair and kind eyes, welcomed me like I belonged. "First time?" she asked. I nodded. "First time doing anything for myself in about 20 years. She smiled. "Well, you're in the right place." That first class, I made a lopsided bowl that collapsed halfway through. But I didn't care. I was terrible at it, and it felt wonderful. Not the empty, dismissive wonderful my husband had used. This was different. This was joy. I started going every week. My hands got better at shaping the clay, finding the rhythm, feeling the potential in something shapeless. And slowly, I started applying that same patience to my own life. I joined a book club. I started hiking on weekends. I even went on a solo trip to the coast, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the courage to try alone. One Saturday afternoon, I was at a cafe reading when a man approached my table. "Excuse me," he said, "is this seat taken?" I looked up, startled. He was maybe 50 with gray hair and a warm smile. "Oh, no. Go ahead." He sat down, and we ended up talking for 2 hours. His name was David. He was a high school history teacher, recently divorced, trying to figure out what came next. We talked about books, travel, the strange freedom of starting over. When we finally said goodbye, he asked for my number. I gave it to him. My heart racing like I was 16 again. Emily called that night and I told her about David. "Mom, that's great. Are you going to see him again?" "I don't know. Maybe. I'm not looking for anything serious." "You don't have to be. Just have fun." What a concept. I'd spent so long being responsible, being reliable, that I'd forgotten what fun even felt like. David and I started seeing each other casually. Coffee dates, walks in the park, conversations that meandered and deepened. He never tried to fix me or save me. He just listened. And slowly I started to believe that maybe I wasn't broken after all. 3 months after my husband left, he called. "Jessica, I made a mistake. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I want to come home. I miss you." I stood in my kitchen, the same spot where he'd said goodbye, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just nothing. "I'm glad you've been thinking," I said calmly. "And I've been living, and I don't want you back." There was silence on the other end. "You're seeing someone, aren't you?" "That's not the point. The point is I'm finally seeing myself." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were steady. No shaking, no tears. Just clarity. That weekend, I took the bowl I'd made in pottery class, the one that had actually turned out well, and placed it on the kitchen counter. It wasn't perfect. The glaze was uneven, and one side was slightly thicker than the other. But it was mine. I'd made it with my own hands, and it was beautiful in its imperfection. Emily came to visit the following month. She walked through the house, noticing all the changes. The new paint colors, the artwork I'd hung, the absence of things that used to define the space. "Mom," she said, her eyes shining. "You look happy." I smile. "I'm proud of you. I know this wasn't easy." I thought about that word again. Easy. Nothing about the past few months had been easy. It had been terrifying and lonely and uncertain. But it had also been necessary. "You know what I've learned?" I said. "For years I thought my value came from what I did for other people. I was a good wife, a good mother, a good employee. But I forgot to be a good me." Emily hugged me tight. "Well, you're making up for it now." That night after she left, I stood on my back porch watching the stars. The air was cool, the night was quiet, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely at peace with being alone. I thought about the woman I'd been in those yellow dish gloves. Heartbroken. And lost. I wanted to go back and tell her that everything was going to be okay. That the pain would fade. That she was stronger than she knew. But I couldn't go back. None of us can. All we can do is move forward, one uncertain step at a time. Until we find ourselves again. 6 months after my husband left, I got a promotion at work. The head librarian position had opened up, and for the first time in my career, I applied without hesitation. During the interview, they asked me what had changed. I finally stopped waiting for permission, I said. Permission to want more, to ask for more, to be more. I got the job. When I called Emily to tell her, she screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Mom, that's incredible. We have to celebrate." That weekend, we went out for dinner, just the two of us. Over dessert, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm really glad you're my mom," she said. "And I'm glad you're finally living for yourself." I blinked back tears. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." David and I kept seeing each other, but we took things slow. There was no rush, no pressure. We were both building new lives. And we were happy to let those lives unfold naturally. One evening, we were sitting on my porch watching the sunset, and he turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret your marriage? All those years?" I thought about it carefully. "No, I don't regret it. But I regret losing myself in it. I regret thinking that loving someone meant disappearing." He nodded. "I get that. But I don't regret where I am now. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't gone through all of that." He smiled. "You're pretty amazing, you know that." I laughed. "I'm just figuring that out myself." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized something profound. My husband leaving hadn't been the end of my story. It had been the beginning. The beginning of a life where I was the main character, not the supporting role. The beginning of discovering who I was when I wasn't defined by someone else. The beginning of understanding that it's never too late to start over. The pottery class continued through the fall and into winter. I got better, more confident. My pieces were still imperfect, but they were uniquely mine. Margaret pulled me aside one evening. "Jessica, have you ever thought about selling your work? You've got a real talent." I was stunned. "Sell it? I'm just a beginner. Sometimes the best art comes from beginners." "You're not overthinking it. You're just creating." I thought about it for days. The idea of putting my work out there, of letting people judge it, terrified me. But then I remembered the woman I'd been 6 months ago, afraid to take a pottery class. Afraid to be alone, afraid of everything. I wasn't that woman anymore. I set up a small table at a local craft fair the next month. My pieces were arranged carefully, each one tagged with a price that felt absurdly hopeful. I sat behind the table, my stomach in knots, waiting. Within an hour, I'd sold 3 pieces. By the end of the day, my table was almost empty. People didn't just buy my pottery. They told me stories. A woman bought a mug for her sister who was going through a divorce. A man bought a vase for his mother's 70th birthday. A young couple bought a set of bolts for their new apartment. Each sale felt like a validation, not just of my art, but of my journey. When I got home that evening, I counted the money with shaking hands. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. I'd earned it by creating something beautiful. Emily called the next day. "Mom, I saw your post about the craft fair. How did it go?" "I sold almost. That's amazing. I'm so proud of you." We talked for an hour, and I realized how much our relationship had shifted. She wasn't worried about me anymore. She was celebrating with me. That winter, I started teaching a beginner pottery class at the community center. It was Margaret's idea. "You know what it's like to start from nothing," she said. "You can help other people do the same." My first class had 8 students. Most of them were women my age, all of them looking for something. A creative outlet, a distraction. A way to reclaim a piece of themselves. I understood that hunger. On the first night, I stood in front of them and said, "I started pottery 6 months ago. I was terrible. I'm still learning. But this class isn't about being perfect. It's about giving yourself permission to create." I saw recognition in their eyes. They knew what I meant. Over the next few months, I watched them transform. Not their pottery skills, though those improved too. But the way they carried themselves, the way they talked about their lives. They were remembering who they were. One woman, Sarah, told me she'd quit her job to start her own business. Another, Linda, said she'd finally left a relationship that made her feel small. "You inspired me," she said. "If you can reinvent yourself, so can I." I didn't feel like an inspiration. I just felt like someone who'd been given a second chance and refused to waste it. By spring, my life looked completely different. I had my new job, my pottery, my class, my friends. I had David, who made me laugh and never made me feel like I had to shrink to fit into his life. I had Emily, who saw me as a whole person, not just her mother. And most importantly, I had myself. One Saturday morning, I was working in my garden, planting flowers I'd picked out just because I liked them, when a car pulled into the driveway. It was my ex-husband. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees, and waited. He looked older, tired. "Jessica," he said, "you look good." Thank you. I heard you got promoted, and that you're teaching pottery now. Word travels. He shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to apologize. For how I ended things. For making you feel like you weren't enough. I looked at him for a long moment. I appreciate that. But I need you to know something. You leaving was the best thing that ever happened to me. He blinked, surprised. Really? I was so busy being what you needed that I forgot to be what I needed. You gave me the chance to find that again. He nodded slowly. I'm glad, I really am. As he drove away, I went back to my garden. The sun was warm on my face. And the earth was soft under my hands. I planted each flower carefully, giving them space to grow. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea and watched the sunset. The sky was painted in brilliant colors, and the air smelled like spring. I thought about the woman in the yellow dish gloves, the one who thought her life was over. I wanted to tell her that endings are just beginnings in disguise. That heartbreak can crack you open. But it can also let the light in. That it's never too late to become who you were always meant to be. The stars came out one by one, filling the darkness with tiny points of light. I sat there for hours. Not lonely, not afraid, just present. Just alive. And as the night deepened around me, I realized that this was what freedom felt like. Not the absence of love or connection or responsibility. But the presence of choice, the choice to define myself. The choice to take up space. The choice to be more than wonderful. I picked up my phone and texted David. Want to go on an adventure tomorrow? He replied immediately. Where to? I smiled. Anywhere. Everywhere. Let's just drive and see where we end up. That night, I fell asleep with a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. The future was wide open, unwritten, mine to shape. And for the first time in my life, that didn't scare me. It thrilled me. Because I finally understood something fundamental. You don't need someone else to complete you. You don't need permission to start over. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment. All you need is the courage to take one step, and then another, and then another. Until one day you look back and realize you've walked yourself into a completely new life. A life you chose. A life you built. A life that's authentically, beautifully, imperfectly yours. That morning my husband told me he was leaving. I thought my world was ending. I didn't know it was just beginning. And honestly, I wouldn't change a single thing. Not the heartbreak, not the loneliness, not the fear, because all of it led me here. To this moment, to this life, to myself. And that's worth everything.